Iran's foreign policy is a continuous matter. It is possible that every government might advance the work with a series of initiatives, with a different dialogue, or with new initiatives. But our foreign policy has a set of fixed principles that every government tries to advance. In Dr. Pezeshkian's government, a higher priority was given to our neighbors. And we, in fact, set our entire goal on Iran's neighborhood environment, Iran's peripheral environment. Now, when I say neighbors, it doesn't necessarily mean immediate neighbors. Thus, more countries were situated in our peripheral environment compared to just our immediate neighbors. In our peripheral environment, first of all, peace and tranquility should be established. And then the groundwork for economic, political, and cultural cooperation should be created. The slogan that we actually chose, and which I added as a hashtag in every tweet I posted about meeting with a neighboring country, was, "Our neighbors, our priority." And placing priority on neighbors naturally entails certain requirements. One of these requirements is resolving any kind of tension in relations with any of our neighbors. It involves expanding relations. It is about creating new grounds and new capacities in the relationship. And for this very reason, alongside the neighborhood policy, we also initiated the policy of provincial diplomacy, because when we examined it, we saw that each of our provinces, in the border provinces that are adjacent to our neighboring countries, possess very high capacities that have been neglected up until now. Capacities for economic interaction across the border with our neighboring countries. So, we started provincial diplomacy. The further we got into it, the more convinced we became of how extensive these capacities are, and also that provinces that are not adjacent to the border also have the capacity for provincial diplomacy with other countries and with their similar provinces in our neighboring countries and our peripheral environment. And this provincial diplomacy, incidentally, was very widely utilized. Meaning, if I were to name one of the completely new features of Dr. Pezeshkian's government, it is this very provincial diplomacy, which many people didn't understand at first. I think they thought I was just going on provincial tours or doing some kind of, I don't know, propaganda work or such jokes. But it gradually caught on, and they realized that provincial diplomacy can be one of the pillars of our relations and our diplomacy with our neighbors, meaning it is a complement to neighborhood diplomacy. Especially in the provinces themselves, it was highly welcomed. Before this war, I should say that perhaps several governors contacted me and requested that I take a trip to their provinces and help establish the province's capacities with its neighboring province or with other provinces in surrounding countries. And they introduced capacities to me that were truly amazing, which could lead to an expansion of exports. It could lead to an expansion of imports of goods that are currently entering the country at much higher prices. Many of our border problems can be solved much more easily between two border provinces than between two capitals. A problem that, for example, exists at our border, say, border markets, border crossings, smuggling, issues that exist at the border. For instance, let's assume at one of our borders with Iraq. This can be resolved much faster and more easily between two adjacent provinces than if it were to be transferred to the capitals, so Tehran and Baghdad could be in contact with each other. I'm just giving this as an example. I don't mean to say there is a specific problem at our borders. Well, at all our borders ultimately, there are crossing problems, various problems, and therefore, provincial diplomacy quickly found its place in the country, and we took action to hold conferences, meaning conferences for provincial diplomacy in every corner of the country. For example, in the northeast of the country, we held a conference under the title of Provincial Diplomacy in the city of Mashhad. All the neighboring provinces brought their capacities, whether in the private sector or the public sector. I invited our ambassadors in the countries adjacent to that province. For example, in Mashhad, our ambassadors in Central Asian countries, and then in Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Indian subcontinent. Even a country like Iraq, for example. Although it doesn't border Mashhad, we have about 3 million Araghchi Shia pilgrims a year who visit the city of Mashhad. This in itself is a capacity, and increasing it can have very good results. I invited our ambassadors, those who have the capacity to work with the northeastern provinces of the country, and very good conclusions were reached. We held this same event in another location as well. We were pursuing a third one when we hit the war, and currently it has been somewhat suspended. But at the earliest opportunity, we will revive this provincial diplomacy. It is one of the distinguishing features of the 14th government's neighborhood diplomacy. We did not create provincial diplomacy for a time of war. We created it to expand relations with neighboring countries. But during the war, how should I say it? It showed its blessing. Because many of the channels had been created, back and forths had been established. And during the war, we needed some of the country's essential goods to be supplied through neighboring countries, especially after the naval blockade that was illegally imposed by America. Well, we turned towards land routes and other routes to supply the essential goods of the country. And we were successful in this regard because our border provinces had already established their connections with adjacent provinces, and the routes had already been identified. And therefore, this helped us a lot during the war, so that the country's needs, even specifically the needs that exist in areas adjacent to the border, could be supplied through these provincial connections. Dr. Pezeshkian strongly believes in the unity of the Islamic Ummah and the unity of Islamic countries. I was present in his numerous meetings with the heads of neighboring countries, who are all Muslim, and one of his main discussions was always why we shouldn't work together, why we shouldn't cooperate. Why shouldn't Islamic countries be in a unified collection like the countries of the European Union? Why shouldn't there be a railway line? The example he himself gave every time was, why shouldn't there be a railway line that Muslims from Pakistan can board? And suppose if they want to go to Mashhad, if they want to come to Qom, come to Tehran, Iran cities, if they want to go to Karbala, Najaf, if they want to go to Mecca, this pilgrimage route or connection route of Islamic countries. Why don't we have such a unified train line? Meaning, his perspective is one that encompasses the Islamic world, an Islamic world-oriented view, and a look toward the Islamic Ummah. Meaning, he has a genuinely grand vision. And let me say again, as a memory, in one of the meetings, the president of the respective country debated with him a lot that something called the Islamic Ummah no longer exists. Why? Because the division among Islamic countries is very high. Some have gone towards America, others have gone towards other directions. And Dr. Pezeshkian seriously debated with him that this is not the case. And if we converse more with each other, if we can have more interactions, surely this Islamic unity can be revived again. And this stems from his own heartfelt belief and his personal view that believes the unity of the Islamic world can be revived. A concept that perhaps has been somewhat forgotten for years by Islamic countries. When they created the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, it was previously called the Organization of the Islamic Conference. Then it became the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. That this perspective is being revived again was interesting to me, and it came from the depth of his personal ideological perspective. And well, its manifestation in foreign policy, he strongly believes in dialogue, believes in verbal communication and talking. During his trip to Iraq, well, when we went to the Kurdistan region of Iraq, the Kurdistan region, because he was able to communicate with the people around him in Kurdish, he was extremely welcomed by them. And truly, in my opinion, it gave a fundamental push to our relations with that region towards progress. The same goes for Azerbaijan, for example, when he traveled there. Our relations, which have always had their ups and downs and faced problems, completely changed during his trip because of the verbal connection he established with the president of Azerbaijan. And now, as an example, during the time of the war, this recent four-day war, a problem arose, which doesn't matter now, but a problem arose that soured the relationship a bit. A single phone call from Dr. Pezeshkian to the president of Azerbaijan, and, as we say, a friendly chat in the Azeri language, using a few Azeri proverbs, completely turned the tables and changed the scene entirely. And this has strengthened his belief that truly through dialogue and through interaction, achievements can be reached that cannot be reached through tension, fights, and bad temper. And truly, in my opinion, he is somewhat of a foreign policy theoretician in this regard. Look, the 12-day war severely expanded and strengthened our relations with our neighbors. All of our neighbors in that war condemned the attack of the Zionist regime, stood with us, and supported the people of Iran, and well, they also provided aid. In the four-day war, the situation was somewhat different. The reason was the presence of America in this war, which created reservations for some countries. And then, when the war expanded to the region, well, naturally, our relationship with the countries on the southern shores of the Persian Gulf entered a new, tension-filled phase. We still maintained good relations with the rest of our neighboring countries in the Central Asia region, the Caucasus region, the eastern side of the country with Afghanistan and Pakistan, the western side with Turkey and Iraq. In fact, they provided very significant assistance in supplying some of the country's essential goods, medicinal issues, and even giving permission to stranded Iranians to return to the country through their routes. They cooperated a lot. Even some of our planes entered through their routes. And politically, they expressed sympathy, sent condolence messages, and sent congratulatory messages for the new leadership. We still maintained that good relationship with these countries. In the southern shores of the Persian Gulf, well, the situation became something else, which is natural. And well, in the first few days, relations had become severely bitter. And then gradually, from the middle of the war, and later during the ceasefire, we started to interact with some of them and revived the communication channels we had. It has responded very well with some of them, less with some, and more with others. The important point is that as a result of this war, the regional countries' perspective on the security structure of the region fundamentally changed. In the previous view, there was reliance on foreign forces to provide security. The recent war showed that foreign forces and foreign bases not only failed to bring security, but became a disruptor of security. Meaning, those who did not have these bases in their country actually remained safer and were less affected by this war than countries that had American bases inside them, which were supposed to protect them, but actually supported the Zionist regime. And they couldn't defend them against the blows that were dealt, not to them, but to American bases, interests, and facilities in their countries. It is natural. After all, there were side effects and collateral damage, which is the nature of any war, along with the wartime conditions imposed on them. This war was very effective, in my opinion, in changing the region's approaches to security and political issues and the way of coexistence with Iran. In my opinion, there is now a more accurate and correct understanding in the regional countries that security in the Persian Gulf region must absolutely be collective security, and it must absolutely include economic dimensions as well. You cannot reach a permanent peace with economic imbalance among regional countries. You cannot reach sustainable and collective security with security imbalance in regional countries. New perspectives have been created, and therefore our contacts with these countries have also started again with a new look and new connections, and in my opinion, it is moving in a good direction. One of these countries that I must mention is Qatar, which officially entered into mediation between us and America. It played a very important role alongside Pakistan. Of course, These are the two countries where it is clear. Pakistan played a very effective role in mediating between Iran and America and in reaching an agreement. Qatar also entered from this specific point. They also played a very positive role. And our relationship with Qatar has reached a very good stage. Similar communications have also begun with others. I don't want to go into the details of it right now, but I am very hopeful that our relationship with the future of the Persian Gulf region will be a very good relationship. And this region will begin a new era with new approaches that will be to the benefit of all the countries and nations of the region. His presidency and my time at the Foreign Ministry have been a very difficult period. Of course, we pursued our normal missions in foreign policy and economic diplomacy. But simultaneously with the conflict issues in the region, what happened in Lebanon and Syria, and then the 12-day war, the recent Ramzan or 4-day war, and then the riots that took place and foreign interventions, it has been a turbulent period. Alongside this, negotiations took shape, indirect negotiations that took place with America, and then the recent negotiations that led to a memorandum of understanding. All of these have created a very busy, difficult, and roller coaster foreign policy. And well, on this path, Dr. Pezeshkian was fully supportive and supported us, so to speak. One of his characteristics, in my opinion, is giving a sort of independence to foreign policy in its operations. And this stems from the trust he has in his managers and the trust he had in the management of the foreign ministry. Our foreign policy allowed us a free hand in working, only asking of us that it be within the framework of the leader's guidelines and his own views, and of course, the national interests of the country. And I think confidence has thankfully been established in him. His expectations, well, in these difficult conditions, were specifically focused on efforts to reduce tension, create dialogue, establish negotiations for the benefit of the country, resolve disputes during wartime, and end the war. And perhaps his constant recommendation in every cabinet meeting or any meeting we had during the war was in this vein, that the foreign ministry take steps in this direction. Look, for the first 2 weeks of the war, there was no request for a ceasefire from America. Some countries requested to step forward, establish connections, and mediate. Our answer to all of them was clear, and it was the answer that the President also believed in, that we do not want a ceasefire. We want an end to the war. We do not want the 12-day war, which stopped with a ceasefire, but repeated again a few months later. We do not want this to turn into a pattern that constantly repeats in our country. Therefore, this time, we are against a ceasefire. Why? Because the war must end, in a way that it will not repeat again. This was an issue he also conveyed. They tried to contact some heads of state in those days. Of course, making contact in those early days was very difficult and almost impossible, but our message was this. And then, when the Americans became hopeless about all the goals they had, we remember it was the second or third day of the war that Trump tweeted in 2 words, "Unconditional surrender," and well, they were looking for surrender and became hopeless. They went after regime change and became hopeless. They went after partition and became hopeless. They went after internal riots. They pursued any plan they could and remained unsuccessful in bringing this war to a quick conclusion. The result was that I think it was around the 22nd or 23rd of Esfand that their requests for negotiations started. Of course, their first request started with a 15-point text, which was essentially a letter of surrender. And if someone one day brings that 15-point list and compares it with the memorandum of understanding we have now reached in 14 points, it is completely clear where we started and where we ended up. What requests they had, and what actually happened in practice. When the Americans brought up the request for negotiation, well, Dr. Pezeshkian given the consistent view he had, believed that attention should be paid to these requests, so to speak, and that we could find a way to end the war through this very path. And this led to the meetings that took place, directing the path toward conversation and examining different proposals. After 3 months, we reached the Memorandum of Understanding. This is from roughly the 22nd or 23rd of Esfand, when the first messages arrived, until the memorandum that was signed on the 25th of Khordad. We had negotiations for 3 months with many ups and downs, and throughout this entire path, Dr. Pezeshkian was truly our main supporter. The main supporter of the negotiating team, which was headed by Dr. Ghalibaf at his discretion, but truly his steadfast support and his opposition to all other ideas and obstacles that existed, was, in my opinion, the most important factor in allowing us to reach this understanding. I can boldly say that he had a very important role and guided it. Of course, Dr. Ghalibaf did the same. But the President, as a President has in foreign policy, followed this matter with full oversight. He was personally present in all meetings, even in committee meetings where, as a rule, it shouldn't have been necessary. Meaning, he would be present, but on his own initiative, he would come and guide the meeting in the direction he expected it to go. I believe his presence in foreign policy was an effective presence. The selection of Dr. Ghalibaf was proposed by the President, and he made this suggestion. Even in the drafted meeting minutes, he insisted that Dr. Ghalibaf's name must be included as the head of the negotiation before he would sign it. Because perhaps Dr. Ghalibaf himself was showing humility and said, "Let the outcome be decided, the outcome of the negotiations." And then regarding the negotiators, he said, "I agree to negotiations on the condition that Dr. Ghalibaf is present. The Foreign Ministry will naturally be there and will do its job." Alongside this, in my opinion, Dr. Ghalibaf's steadfastness and fighting spirit in the meetings complemented one another. Well, as the Foreign Ministry, we were also doing our duty. Therefore, a team was formed. In my opinion, at the macro level, the President himself, Dr. Ghalibaf, and the Foreign Ministry were able to bring this work to a conclusion. Look, regarding the doctor, regardless of which political faction he belongs to or is identified with, in my opinion, he is a very principled person. He is a reformist in reforming existing situations and a principlist in adhering to principles. I genuinely saw him as a completely principled person, committed to principles. He does not compromise at all when it comes to the ideals of the revolution. He does not compromise at all when it comes to implementing the leader's guidelines. And he does not compromise at all when it comes to pursuing the rights of the people and national interests. Meaning, in these directions, he is truly principled. His view of the armed forces is a completely realistic view based on reality, and he believes that the armed forces must be strengthened. Meaning, as a duty of the government in supporting the armed forces, he doesn't reduce this to a mere organizational duty. He sees it as his own belief that the needs of the armed forces, especially the livelihood of the armed forces personnel, must be secured so that the country's security is provided. I've seen him time and again be precise on these directions, insisting on them and not falling short at all. In addition to this, even when the government was facing economic constraints and funding issues between the two wars, and much more so during the war, he absolutely did not fall short in meeting the needs of the armed forces. His view is a principled view. The country's defensive capability, in his opinion, is an undeniable and obvious necessity. And he has done everything in his power to strengthen this defensive capability. And perhaps I am a witness that in meetings ultimately, he and the armed forces have a discussion about this. And eventually, it is the doctor who provides for their needs from wherever possible. Fundamentally, his perspective is a people-oriented and comprehensive perspective. These days, everyone talks about the people, but they mean a segment of the people. They act as the spokesperson for all the people, acting like the people do this and the people do that. But in truth, they mean a specific segment of the people. Dr. Pezeshkian's view is completely comprehensive, and as much as he pays attention to the people who are out in the field, he also pays attention to the people who might not be in the field. And he feels obligated to provide for the livelihood of all the people of Iran and to work for all the people of Iran, for their security, their education, their health care, their economic and cultural issues, and he truly wants the best for the people. I have repeatedly heard words from him that perhaps aren't fitting to repeat, about how, especially during the war, how he wants the best for the people. Dr. Pezeshkian speaks from the heart. He has his own specific literature, and truly there is no one, friend or foe, who doubts his sincerity. Meaning, even those who might not accept, for example, some of his views or policies, they all admit that he has sincerity, and when he speaks with his heart. He isn't caught up in the entanglements of political economy, or as he puts it, protocols and such. He speaks very comfortably, and because of this, he connects comfortably with the people. But when it comes to the people's pain, with his own literature, he truly suffers deeply and speaks out. I genuinely think nothing occupies his mind day and night more than how to fulfill his duty toward the people. Well, when I returned from that leadership meeting, my first concern was that, apart from the leader himself, whom we were all worried about, well, I was worried about the president himself. When I returned from that leadership meeting, my first concern was that, apart from the leader himself, whom we were all worried about, well, I was worried about the president himself, wondering whether in this attack, because you two were together in the complex, everyone, whether, God forbid, any harm had come to him or not. I think it was that same night that we were informed that he was, thankfully, safe. The conditions on the first day were very difficult conditions, and well, we had to carry out a series of actions as the foreign ministry. We got involved immediately. The statements we issued, the letters we wrote to the United Nations, the contacts I established with many regional countries and with foreign ministers of other countries, setting the stage to show the righteousness of the Iranian people, the oppression of the Iranian people, and the defense that would take place. And the first warning, I remember, that same afternoon of that same day, I gave to the regional countries. I contacted the foreign ministers and said that given the nature of the attack carried out against us by America, we will target the American bases in the region, which unfortunately are located on your soil. You must know that you are not the target. America is the target, and the American base on your soil. Well, of course, they didn't expect this. Well, they did expect it, and for a long time we had this struggle with the regional countries regarding this issue. I think my first contact with the president was established that same night, or perhaps the next day, through Mr. Haji Mirzaei, who truly moved step by step alongside the president throughout this war. In my opinion, the post-war era of Iranian foreign policy will be completely different from the pre-war era for a very important reason. The perception of a weak Iran has been completely destroyed. Because of the issues I mentioned that occurred in the region, happened inside Iran and such. Economic problems. These had gradually caused an image to form in many countries of the world that Iran is now weak. And this very false perception caused the attack to take place, because they thought they could eliminate a weak Iran in a few days. After 4 days of resistance, this perception of a weak Iran has transformed into the perception of a tough Iran, a resilient Iran, an Iran that can stand its ground in the most difficult conditions. I said this here. Let me say it here too. I told some foreign officials. I said, perhaps it is impossible for you to even imagine that for 4 days, against the most seemingly powerful army in the world, which also has nuclear weapons, and another army that considers itself the strong army of the region, and also has nuclear weapons, you resist for 4 days without air defense. It's absolutely unimaginable for many countries. And to resist for 4 days while being bombed every day. Of course, when I say being bombed every day, and we have no defense, the other side is also true, so to speak. Neither the American bases nor the Zionist regime had defense against our missiles completely, meaning their airspace was also open to our missiles, and they were taking hits every day, and well, this was a part of our resistance too. But for you to resist in these conditions, your police forces, their facilities, their buildings all destroyed, yet they stand at night under bridges, stand in buses, stand in cars, but carry out their mission and their duty in maintaining the security of society and cities. And the rest of our armed forces, well, many of their centers had been bombed. But they did their jobs. Even our officials, our political officials. I saw an analysis somewhere in one of the countries that said the world had underestimated the people of Iran. No one thinks that the Iranian people are so tough and resilient. The world had underestimated the Iranian armed forces and didn't think they could maintain their fire until the last moment and respond mutually to every attack. And then the world had also underestimated Iranian officials. No one thinks that officials could be martyred one by one, but not abandon their posts, not abandon their responsibilities. This is a reality in Iran. No one, no official, abandoned their work, nor resigned, nor went home and hid somewhere, nor, God forbid, left the country or sought asylum, or these sorts of things that happen in other countries when crises arise. Not only inside the country, let me explicitly defend my own colleagues here. Not one of our diplomats who were abroad, exposed to incidents, exposed to all kinds of propaganda and pressures. And they tried hard to somehow co-opt 1 or 2 of our diplomats so they would abandon their duties and, for example, protest and such. Not a single one happened. None of our employees, none of our diplomats. It is even interesting. Not even one of our local employees abandoned their work during this period, and they stood firm. And with the meetings they had, the interviews they gave, the tweets they posted, I think you surely noticed, even Western media confessed that Iran's public diplomacy this time was extremely strong and extremely effective. More effective than all the Western media. A country like Iran, alone and under pressure, through the tweets our embassies posted, influenced the entire Western media space. Well, these are truly a source of pride for us. All of these collectively showed the toughness of the Iranian people. And in all these conditions, the foreign ministry was the loud voice of the Iranian people, in the form of interviews conducted either by the spokesperson or our directors, or myself taking positions, speaking with full self-confidence at the height of the bombings, giving interviews, broadcasting the voice of the Iranian people to the world, showing our toughness and declaring our resistance. This was truly a very great work that was accomplished. The martyred leader and Mr. Pezeshkian, as far as I was aware and saw, had a very close emotional relationship. Mr. Pezeshkian truly loved our martyred leader and was completely aligned with him. And in the joint meetings that were held, and I was present, I saw that our martyred leader also spoke to the gentleman with both respect and emotion, very courageously. And truly, there was a very close and simultaneously rational and logical interaction between our martyred leader and Mr. Pezeshkian. And of course, wherever it was necessary, Mr. Pezeshkian followed suit. Our approach, all of us in the position of decision-making and decision-shaping, and in the position of consultation, we announce our own views. But when a decision is made, we are all followers of that decision and move in that direction. Dr. Pezeshkian has tried more than anything else to bridge this gap in distance, in my opinion. He is attentive to the ideological gap within society, and that our society should not become bipolar. Society should not become fragmented over the main issues of the country. But did you see what his main slogan, his key word was? Meaning, he is always looking to ensure that this gap within the system, which is an ideological gap stemming from differences in taste that sometimes lead to serious disputes and bad conflicts, and, so to speak, very destructive political disputes, the result of which is ultimately backwardness in many areas, does not happen. This is his main concern, and I have seen him exhibit self-sacrifice in this regard. I say this truly honestly. Many of the fights, for example, some will come and say, "Sir, so-and-so did this, so-and-so did that," and with his own special terminology he says, "Let it go, man, I don't know." They say, "Sir, so-and-so said this," they say, "Never mind." Right now, these talks are not important. What's important is that we work together. And he himself has personally gone to different places, engaged in dialogue with different people. In employing people from different factions, he has never hesitated, meaning the faction was not important to him, but whether that person is capable of the job or not. And you can surely find examples of people he has employed who faced severe protests from, for instance, even his own faction members, so to speak. No, he truly believes that the principle of consensus is his key word. And this consensus is not just among ethnicities and genders and such. It is about the way of thinking and the perspective of society. And in my opinion, society owes him a lot in this regard, as he has shown self-sacrifice to create consensus and have society move uniformly. The biggest tragedy of a society is these false polarizations, and sometimes real ones, that are created, and we couldn't control them and suffered the consequences. Our foreign policy framework will be shaped based on a strong Iran, an Iran with self-confidence and in control of the situation. Meaning, from now on, the image that the people of the world have reached of Iran and will see in practice is an image of a powerful, strong foreign policy with competence, pursuing national interests, pursuing the rights of the Iranian people, and pursuing the pride and glory of the Iranian people. This, in my opinion, is the biggest characteristic of our foreign policy in the new era. I said this to all my colleagues as well. I said, be aware. You are now representatives of a nation that defeated a superpower. Therefore, let's hold our heads high. Our flag is high, with a held high head, with commanding language. It is possible to speak to the world with an assertive and demanding tongue, to take the rights of the Iranian people and show the face of a powerful Iran to the world. Look, the duty of the government is to provide for the needs of the people. Not all needs are produced domestically. Inevitably, they must be imported. And the duty of foreign policy is also to pave the ways for the importation of goods, find new markets, and create the necessary political spaces so these goods can enter the country. During the war era, due to the war itself and the naval blockade that took place, this work was done with greater difficulty and hardship, but it was done, and we truly supplied the needs of the country. Of course, there are naturally shortages. Any war inherently brings some problems along with it. Naturally, we had price increases. Naturally, there were shortages in some places. But in my opinion, the government left a very good track record in providing for the livelihood and economic needs of the people. And I witnessed that all of our ministries, especially the economic ministries, truly put their heart and soul into it and endured hardship to perform their duty in these difficult conditions. Specifically regarding peace and war, it is completely clear in our Constitution who makes the decision. We did our job, as I mentioned, based on a thought and rationality that was the collective rationality of the system. According to the instructions given to us, foreign ministries all over the world are subject to their instructions. They follow instructions, so to speak. No foreign ministry, no diplomat does things on their own. It is always based on the instructions that are given to them, so to speak. They have certain limits of authority, but in macro matters, the country's positions are decided elsewhere, and the foreign ministry is the executor and must implement them. This is what happened in Iran as well, and we moved within the framework of our duties and our authorities. Rest assured that the foreign ministry has carried out its duty and mission well and knows how to move forward.